not every workflow needs to be agentic. Agents are great. MCP is great. There's a great place for standardized apps, and there's a great place for workflows as well. I'm super pro MCP in general, but that being the case, my overarching framework is going to be about use cases, about implementation, of which perhaps it's not always the right tool. As the use case evolves and as what people are looking for across systems changes, MCP will become more and more relevant. And I think also when people get more familiar and some of the security concerns one might have go away, that would also help.
Today, my guest is Cody Holden, Senior Product Manager of MCP and Integrations Platform at HubSpot. Cody has one of the most interesting journeys into product I've ever seen. He started out in 2011 as a news writer, then became a technical content writer and documentations lead at Miratech, before spending years in product management across several companies. In 2024, he joined HubSpot as a product manager for their developer ecosystem and was recently promoted to Senior PM overseeing MCP and integrations. Cody's been leading the charge of building HubSpot's MCP client from scratch and modernizing their APIs to be truly AI ready, which we'll unpack the details in today's episode. If you build APIs, manage integrations, or just want to understand where AI meets platform engineering, you're going to love this one. Before we jump in, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube and follow our show in your favorite podcasting app. All of our episodes are available as audio versions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Links are in the description. With that, I bring you Cody Holden. Well, Cody, let's kind of get to know you a little bit. I think you have a very interesting journey into tech, and obviously it's always kind of cool to see people that get very creative into the space, but you started out your career in 2011 as a news writer, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm originally from South Louisiana, so I was living in Baton Rouge, going to LSU, and I was the news editor for the weekly paper there. So couple of cool things there. So talking to a lot of, mayoral candidates or news stories around Baton Rouge, or sampling like latest po' boy restaurants would be more fun as well. So pretty exciting stuff as well, but just really kind of getting into writing and understanding like an audience is really the main thing that kind of prepared me for later on.
That's amazing. And now seeing where your journey is, which we'll get to into the podcast, but it's kind of cool because API, self-documenting, making sure good documentation exists there, having that technical background definitely is a plus. Would you agree?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I think no matter how valuable something is, or if I'm unable to communicate that to an audience, or more importantly, various audiences of various like strata of technical expertise, then it's really diminishes the value of that entire thing. So being able to communicate, being able to make things clear, being able to use your words kind of wisely and accelerate people's understanding of it, that's something I saw in news writing and several other jobs, and particularly in tech, and particularly as a technical product manager as well.
No, well said. And what's cool is one of my favorite cities ever to visit is New Orleans. I absolutely love to go to Mardi Gras. But the reason why is I love Creole. I love that French culture cuisine. So like crawfish, gumbo. So, I mean, growing up there, you must have been just eating good, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a great place to visit. All my family's still from there. My name's Cody Holden. I'm actually from Holden, Louisiana as well. So we're very in the mix. But I have been recently inheriting quite a bit of black cast iron kind of cauldrons from my grandparents as well. So yeah, it's great. I'll have to mail you some. I can only cook it for about 40 people at a time due to the size of it. But it's spot on. It's great for sure.
I'd ask you to refrain because I live in a condo, and if I bring one more dish back, I think my wife might kill me. Like the other day, I was at Williamson in Sonoma, and I was like, let me buy this big pot. And then my wife's like, it's great, but where do we put it? There's nowhere to put it. So we put it in our oven because that's a condo. You just put everything in the oven. But amazing. And so you moved into technical writing, and then you came to a company called Miratech, where eventually you became the lead writer and technical writing manager. And what's cool, we actually hired a technical content writer, and I can kind of see him going down the same path. Eventually he'll be lead writer and then probably transition into tech. But tell me a little bit about Miratech, because you came there as the lead writer and technical writing manager.
For sure. Yeah. So that was kind of my first foray into tech. Miratech is going to be in a legal matter management space. So really providing a lot of solutions for like lawyers and legal teams to manage their cases. Not radically dissimilar in some ways from a CRM and how a business would manage all their contacts and associations, et cetera. But one of the things that was really interesting there, this was, over 10, 12 years ago at this point, we were existing in an area where we would have on-premise software. We would have kind of some cloud solutions available as well. As you'd imagine, it'd be a unique space with legal information that, some situations may require more of an on-premise deployment. But a lot of the documentation even was in like PDFs that were being sent out. So it's not up to date. It's not current. Once it's out there, it's impossible to kind of unring a bell here, right? So if I give someone a document, they're not getting the latest updates on it, they're going to be out of date and out of compliance on that as well. So a lot of my progression in that company was largely driven to moving that to like more of a modern online platform, which seems taken for granted nowadays, but that was kind of a large shift. Likewise as well, MeetYourTech was trying to expand a little bit for a developer interactions. So we're also building out APIs, and that was kind of my first interaction with how APIs work and understanding it. It's great to explore that. Technical writing is an extremely valuable skill set to have and career. At the same time, I was finding myself writing a lot of this documentation, and sometimes it doesn't matter how good the document is. If the customer, the client, or if there's a culture of not reading the docs, if I just reach out to customer support instead, or if I'm just going to play around with this until I find it, kind of the value of that doc gets diminished. So one of the things that I really found is that I wanted to be have the ball in my hands a little bit more. Have a lot of subject matter expertise on the APIs because I'm writing all the docs and interfacing with the developers every day on it, but can't really affect change as much as I would have liked. And that was really probably the primary mover into me moving into product management after that.
And that makes total sense. And so while you were writing like the content and really like evangelizing it and making sure it's good for the developers, who was the audience? Was it people at your company or was it the clients of MeetYourTech?
For sure. Yeah. A lot of this is going to be more so on the client side, but also, internally is going to be really important as well. Internal APIs, just because I can go over to someone's desk. This is also, pre-COVID, pre-remote work, right? So I could lean over someone's desk in a cubicle and get the information. That's great, but it's not really scalable. And as people leave the company, it's difficult to kind of have that tribal knowledge to be like a reservoir for like really understandable conception about how the product works. So even internal APIs, great documentation is really important there as well.
No, well said. And so like for me, when I read about things, like when I'm reading about new cooking recipes or just reading about like hobbies that I want to pick up, I have to go and get active with it. Like, so I have to go and try it out. I have to get my hands dirty. While you were writing this content about the APIs, were you experimenting on the side? Were you trying to stand up some projects? Were you like actually implementing with the APIs to kind of get your hands dirty? Or was it just from a pure content point of view?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So one of the things that really helped me out a lot was kind of some of these more abstractions on top of that. It's difficult to kind of get into a development environment and abstractly work with these APIs. One of the things that really helped me out a lot was I was using Postman as an early technical writer to kind of take this documentation and be able to play with it. And then one of the things you'll see a lot now in API references, it's almost like a given, is this try it or test it out feature. We have different code snippets in there, and I can actually interact with kind of a dummy endpoint for this to see how it works. So a lot of that, kind of built that experience and built that familiarity, gave me enough to know how much I don't know and to help scaffold the right questions to ask and develop into product from just technical writing.
No, well said. And I love that saying because as a junior, you think you know everything. You read a couple opinions on the internet and you're like, Kubernetes is the way to go or we die, or some type of like tech jargon. But then as you get more senior, you start to realize I actually don't know what I don't even know. And then the answer slowly becomes, actually, it depends, which is how you can tell a senior for a junior. But okay, very cool. From then, though, you started getting a little bit more into the tech side. You started tinkering. You transitioned into product management. And it seems like you had that domain knowledge, that expertise of understanding this. Where did you go after MeetYourTech? I know you spent about 5 years at multiple companies, but what were some highlights as you were getting into product management?
For sure. Yeah, I would say probably the genesis of this would be a company called GoTransverse. It's a competitor to Zuora, but they were actually truly an API first company. It's a smaller company here in Austin, Texas. I had a great manager there who was really able to see kind of the drive that I had and what I wanted to do while I was working as an API technical writer. On the one hand, this is actually an API first company. You hear that a lot now. Sometimes that means we like APIs. We have some APIs. We would like you to think that we care about APIs, and that can run the gamut to actual API first companies. For me, a company that's actually thinking about the API as a first class citizen in the ideation of the product. So it's not so much, maybe we want developers to interface with this. Let's go ahead and make an API available. It's really part and parcel of the entire deliverable there as well. So working in that environment, I understand how that mattered, had a great manager there, gave me the opportunity to experiment taking on a product management team, and then gradually transition over to that. From there, I spent a lot of time in a company called UShip here based in Austin. So it's in the logistics space. One thing that's interesting about UShip kind of came about closer to the tens, I guess they call it, or like the teens of this century. And I would refer to them as kind of more of like the eBay style model. So if you remember, like several years ago, it was exciting to go on there. I can see something, I can bid, I can adjust my price based on how frequently I'm interacting with the site, based on my kind of zeal for that. I might can actually make a great deal here. So similar for UShip, let's say it's a marketplace for shippers and people shipping stuff as well. So let's say if I'm here based out of Austin, Texas. Let's say I'm driving to visit someone in New York. I can go onto the UShip marketplace and I can see that, hey, somebody needs something dropped off between Houston and New Orleans on the way. So I drive a truck. I could put their couch in the back of my truck. They save some money on the shipping. I would make some additional money on the return. It's a really intriguing idea and it's interesting.
I like it.
What's kind of changing about that is I would say now we're in more of kind of like an Amazon style thing to where I'm not necessarily as concerned about saving the deal. I want to click the button and I need to know that this is going to safely and securely arrive at my house, ideally quickly. And that's all that I'm concerned with. So as that's the case, part of this more customer facing B2C approach that UShip had really needed an approach to move to B2B. Someone's only going to ship a couch so many times, but let's say a car manufacturer or a car dealer may need to ship a lot of cars here as well. The way that we're able to achieve that scale is via APIs and via integrations and really meeting customers where they're at or meeting car dealers where they're at, if you will. So that's where I was able to kind of take that previous API experience from GoTransverse, from MeterTech, from working in documentation, and take that to UShip and really build out their solutions engineering and kind of API ecosystem to support those B2B plays more richly.
That's amazing. And what's funny, you mentioned eBay. So eBay is like one of our biggest customers and investors, and like we get to kind of see the ins and out of how they operate. And so like a whole platform of like what the consumer sees, like going on there, the shopping cart, we help power that with GraphQL Federation. And it's just amazing when you can understand like under the intricacies. And so with UShip, that's actually a fascinating idea. It's kind of like what Uber now has, which is Uber Courier. So you can like send things and somebody can just be the courier and they can deliver it. So if you forget lunch, you can send it to your kid or whatever. But at UShip, you've definitely read this though, but the API manifesto that Jeff Bezos set out, you said that they were one of the first true API first companies. Were they following on that manifesto? Because a lot of companies will say API first and they just offer an API as like one part of their service. But can you dive a little bit more deeper into like how they empower that ethos?
For sure. Yeah, I would say, one of the things is some relationship to kind of larger AI manifesto and best practices there. One of the things that's kind of a common thread with me as well is I think it's important to understand things as frameworks, and then each individual use case is going to be different. So what may work, perfectly for GoTransverse, which is really API first out of the gate, versus UShip, who's like evolving into that way, might be like slightly different in the way we can approach that. So one of the things that we were really thinking of is ideating on the use cases and the core markets that we'd like to go for, and then opening up that platform in kind of verticals here. So rather than us providing like a small solution for all of our different commodities that somebody could ship, we're going to really focus in on cars. We're going to really focus in on freight. We're going to build out a suite of APIs for this. And if we need to adjust the UI retroactively on that, we can do that as well. Sometimes people have a UI-based feature that they just want to abstract into an API. A lot of times that can work, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily work because it's an entirely different persona and use case here for the developer. So I think one of the biggest things about kind of API first is not only just thinking of APIs as this is an extension of a UI-based functionality, but it's really a discrete kind of product on its own. Definitely relates to that, but you're going to enable a lot of people to do more things with it. And that's one of the things I've been really excited about, because if you have an open, active, easily defined, easily documented, and useful API, we were having people come in and build integrations with us. We had X amount of people on payroll, but then we had people spending like every day of their week or all their working hours effectively working to drive more business into our marketplace. Similarly to HubSpot, and HubSpot recently crossed over 2,000 apps. People are working really in leveraging that marketplace, and we're providing them the tools to build that. So it has that kind of synergy of building together, which I think is really attractive and really helps companies grow fast.
No, well said. And I realized I got the company switched up, so my apologies on that, but thank you for clarifying. And so from that point on, bounced around for a couple of years. And then in 2024, you landed as a product manager at HubSpot. And recently were promoted to senior product manager of MCP and integrations platform. By the way, congratulations on the promotion. But tell me a little about your journey at HubSpot. So you came in as just a product manager and then you transitioned into a senior product manager, or did you come in like, how was that journey from HubSpot to where you are now?
For sure. Yeah. So, I'd been senior product manager at a few companies previous to that. I think the opportunity at HubSpot was within their strategic integrations department. So as you can imagine, I'd largely been at smaller startups to where anything kind of remotely adjacent to integrations, APIs was like, Cody's kind of dealing with that. Hearing about HubSpot having a discrete strategic integrations department, and not only that, also kind of a larger ecosystem org over that is like really exciting. Like, not only is this important at this company, but they've really invested in that. You can see that in the personnel, you can see that in the deliverables, and you can see that across the board. So definitely it was exciting to just come into HubSpot whenever I saw there was a role available in strategic integrations. From there, I kind of initially took on a platform team, as well as our Zapier integration, if you're familiar with kind of the automation workflow program Zapier. So managing those two teams, as I was there, my role really started to grow based on my previous experience in the technical space, as well as particularly around APIs. So from there, it kind of expanded onto our API tooling and infrastructure team, which is, the lion's share of a lot of my work is highly relevant to that API tooling and infrastructure team, as well as things like our SDKs, some additional platform work. So that's what really, broadened my scope there as well, and gave me the opportunity to work with enough engineers, other teams to really affect like large scale change. So HubSpot's been really, really supportive and great about a lot of that stuff. And then they also just have tons of people who are very, very clever, very smart, and very active and motivated that are within this ecosystem department, to where connecting outside systems is really their main competency as well. So it's really exciting to be in there.
That's amazing. And I think I'm not sure if he's still the CTO, but the co-founder and CTO of HubSpot, I follow him on Twitter, and he's just like a very intelligent founder, like very technical, which is like what I aspire to do. Is he still the CTO today?
Yeah. Dharmesh is still highly involved. He has a lot of side projects, as you'll see if you follow him on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, super savvy. I think a lot of our stuff, particularly as we move into kind of the AI space, has really been like a thought leader on that. For some of this stuff, I think it's important that you always have to hazard something to be right here. There's not really a use case in which it's like, I want to be right, but I'm not, hazarding the option of being wrong or opportunity costs of other things. And Dharmesh has really kind of brought a lot of that excitement around, like, we're going to invest in AI, we're going to explore this, we want to be on the cutting edge, and really kind of motivated everyone. And we're starting to reap some of those benefits as well. So yeah, great to have him around.
That's awesome. That's such a great transition into AI. But before we do that, I want to talk one last question about like the strategic integration teams. How big is that team, and like what's the chain of command? Do they report directly to Dharmesh, or is there like SVP? Where do they live in the HubSpot ecosystem, which is quite a big company?
For sure. Yeah. So, there is a discrete ecosystem group within HubSpot, of which strategic integrations is a department. So we have teams that are managing like our marketplace. We have teams that are managing kind of our developers and more of third-party built apps. Strategic integrations focuses a little bit more on kind of some platform work and first-party apps. Dev relations. There's all sorts of great teams full with a lot of great friends of mine there across the org. I would say the particular strategic integrations department I'm at has about like 7 PMs on it now, so pretty decent size. We roll up to a group product manager who rolls up to like a VP of ecosystem as well. So even for that, we have 2 additional layers of people who are predominantly ecosystem focused. And then we're also kind of rolling up to our executive vice president, Karen, who was previously, over ecosystem. So to have someone at that tier and at that role, who has that kind of familiarity with APIs, with integrations, with the value of ecosystem, with the value of not only just a UI-based app, but all this extensibility is really exciting as well.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for explaining. And you mentioned, so like you guys are on the cutting edge. I remember early in our journey of WunderGraph, I would say we're on the cutting edge, and people are like, no, you're on the bleeding edge. What do you think about AI? AI, like it's pretty amazing, but would you say it's on the bleeding edge or on the cutting edge?
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I think, it's all relative for sure. So what maybe, even more recent to some might be a little bit less so to others. I would say it depends on the implementation. So some of the general AI use cases, or we're thinking about stuff like RAG or something like, maybe that's some cutting edge stuff as well. But if we want to go even further, one of the things that's really interesting to me, and I'll admit that I'm biased in this as well, would be things like MCP, things like agents even, I think is still kind of really at that cusp of the latest and greatest. I think a lot of people are really excited about that. I would probably help define cutting edge versus bleeding edge. Is sometimes if I'm asking someone about agents, they might have a strong opinion about that. And then I would say, well, just by the way, to set a benchmark, like what is an agent, and the definitions can vary kind of significantly across the board there to different degrees of confidence. So that to me is pretty indicative of what this looks like. Similar to MCP, sometimes it's a little bit harder to understand that. I feel like we're at a point now where generally REST APIs and those operations are kind of uniformly understood or talked about. So until like MCP is in that area, I would consider a lot of this stuff to be bleeding edge, but it's also there's a lot of market support for here. So yeah, I guess it depends on perspective, but it's definitely an interesting question.
And you actually gave me another one that I think I might steal from you, because I think you have such good technical, like the way you explain concepts. So when you talk to your partner, you talk to your kids and they ask, hey dad, like, what do you do for work? How do you explain to them MCP? How do you explain to them AI? And how do you explain to them like just APIs, like what you do at work?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. So again, it varies based on the audience. I've said a couple different things. I've talked to different family members before and described, APIs and integrations. Maybe that's not sticking. Some of that I've mentioned, let's say we have a bunch of trains operating at like a train yard and they're coming through at different times with different loads. And this allows, the thing that I work on allows there to be a centralized control booth that someone can operate for all of these loads coming in and out and all of this data and manage that. So some of that physical stuff can be good. Likewise, some of the value, let's say for MCP and versus AI example, I would say if I'm talking like my children who are very clever, they're 5 and 3, I have a very short window to talk to them about MCP before eyes have glazed over. And that applies to adults sometimes too. But one of the things I'll say is, let's say, for example, if I need to get things done in a different place. So let's say if I could open up my fridge and I could notice that I'm not having eggs, and I could somehow communicate to our supermarket here that I need those eggs, or I'm missing breakfast foods, and it can kind of return those to me. That would be really nice, like automation and workflow here that allows me to have a kind of vague problem. I'm not really having breakfast foods, and then have something make a decision to where I can see, hey, I need to go ahead and get this. This is kind of what the resource that I need returned for that. So a little bit kind of abstract, and you kind of have to work with this a little bit for obviously depending on your audience. But for me, it's similar to MCP, and when you have an LLM or you have an AI kind of as the brain between this interaction and understanding. I'm getting plain language prompting. Hopefully this is scaffolded as nicely as it can be. But I want to make some executive decisions here about what data I need to be rendering, what this person really wants, and what's like the best tool to be making available there. And I think having that kind of autonomous workflow type approach is very attractive and very interesting.
Okay, well said. I'm probably going to steal the fridge example. I really like that one. The example I usually do, and like when I'm explaining to my wife, is like, imagine you go to a restaurant and you're looking at the menu. The menu is the website. You're looking at the resources. You're looking at what's there, and you're like, I want a steak. The steak is going to be made in the back end. That's where the data lives, and it's being made in the kitchen. But how do you get the steak to your plate is a waiter. He's the API. He goes and he fetches the steak, and you don't care anything. He asks you a couple questions. He goes and he gets it, and you totally forgot about it. And she's like, oh, that makes sense. And then she's like, what about Federation? I say, well, imagine you go to a mall and there's 50 restaurants at a mall court, and you're like, maybe I want Chinese. I also want Italian. Ooh, they have Indian, and I want a sandwich. Well, now I would have to go and I'd have to stop at each place, pay, order, and then I have to go to the Chinese place and then the Italian place. And that could take a lot of time, and it's a little bit annoying. And now imagine you're powering billions and billions of requests doing that. GraphQL Federation, what it is, it's a super waiter. It's a guy on skates. You tell him what you want, and he runs to the Chinese, Japanese, whatever places you need to go, and he brings it back to you. And then my mom, I think probably halfway through, she's just like, dang, I'm kind of hungry, and just totally glazes over the example.
Totally. No, that's excellent. Yeah, I totally agree. I think as anybody's going to a food court, I imagine that example will hit pretty resonantly for them as well.
Cool. And then on the MCP, so you've made some significant contributions to what they're building over at HubSpot. So you've built the HubSpot's MCP client for I never know how to pronounce it, agentic use from scratch, and you overhauled their APIs to be modern and AI ready. Everybody's saying AI ready, but what did you actually do to bring in this shift of the bleeding edge and the cutting edge into HubSpot?
For sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, for a lot of this is probably really the lion's share of at least this last year's worth of work. As you can imagine, like MCP was a relatively unknown concept until very recently. Just came out. So it came out. HubSpot wants to be on the bleeding edge, so we're going to kind of attack that problem, see what we can do. Likewise, HubSpot recently released its Breeze Studio, which is kind of an agentic studio that allows for configuration and customization of agents within HubSpot. So one of the things I was thinking about here is it'd be really cool if we could involve MCP in this. That'd be a great kind of playground for people to initially experiment in this, which is available today in beta on HubSpot as well. But one of the things that's really exciting for me about us approaching MCPs is our familiarity with apps, right? So if we think about the app lifecycle, the fact of having someone leverage APIs which can change, APIs which can break, which I'll get into later as well. In that lifecycle of building an app, this could take, I think relatively conservatively, this is like a month's based effort. Now, let's say, for example, I'm looking at an MCP server, relatively quick to stand up on top of APIs. Now, again, some of the quality can vary based on that, but still, relatively speaking, it's much quicker. And then for me to integrate, once I have the client kind of backend set up, for me to integrate an external API, or an external MCP integration, it's going to be, a matter of let's say days or even less, maybe even just, hours for me to connect an outside MCP. So that scale of making it available is really great. It's also a lot more kind of on the partner side as well. So let's say I'm, Cody Tech company, and I'm creating an MCP server. Maybe it would be good for me just to build an app with HubSpot if I want to interact with HubSpot. But if there's a lot of other, agentic enabled platforms that I want to work with, I can build this MCP. It'll give me more of a single source. I can externalize this at the same time. People can integrate against this quickly. So really the scale and rapidity in which people can leverage this stuff is great. In the sense of like our agentic solutions here, let's say we have a call recap agent at HubSpot, or we have a deal loss agent. So if I'm running a business on HubSpot, I'm using the deal loss agent. I'd like to get some analysis on why certain deals haven't turned over. It'd be great to leverage HubSpot's agents as they have today and really get all of that expertise that we've had, the prompts underneath that, and see quality data based on our HubSpot records of why that happened. That's great. What could be even cooler here is, let's say my manager really wants to do an executive briefing on this. For whatever reason, he doesn't like going into HubSpot. He's not going to use HubSpot, and we need things to be more localized. By using MCP, I can connect things like a Notion MCP or the Zapier MCP as well. And then I can say, whenever this agent runs, let's say this runs on like a weekly basis, I want you to go ahead and use our HubSpot tools to summarize all of our HubSpot record data. I can even synthesize that with information from Atlassian or Asana as well. And I'm going to go ahead and create a draft summary executive brief in Notion. And by I mean the agent, actually, in this case. So the agent's going to create that draft summary. Let's say it creates a task for my manager in Asana with a link to that Notion thing, and then I can send him a message on Slack using the Zapier MCP server that's ready. So for that to be kind of running ambiently and that to be running autonomously, or it can be running, at runtime, just clicking that. That's really exciting to have all of that synthesis across systems, and to have that without the rigor or the lift that it would take to do that in an app marketplace way, which would be a significant investment compared to what we've done in a matter of months. I think one of the things, mentioning about APIs, I think, I could wax on this for a while, but I think one of the things about that's important. You mentioned the restaurant earlier. I think it's a great example as well, because one of the things I say to people, they're talking about APIs as well. It's let's say you have a restaurant, you go to the restaurant, food's terrible. I'm not going to go back there again. You wouldn't just go back there and try the food again if you hear they have like a better waiter, or they have a better server, if you will, even. The ingredients remain the same. So that's the one thing that's really important. You can put another server, you can put MCP server in front of your APIs. You can put that other layer that's going to be communicating with, but the APIs are actual real ingredients. And until the ingredients are changed or improved, you're not probably going to have a better experience, however pleasant the server may be.
That's such a good analogy, like, especially when you're talking about API design, and it's like people are like, oh, we'll just throw MCP on top of it. And it's like, no, you have a poorly documented API. You can't just improve the waiter. The ingredients aren't good. I'm going to steal that for sales calls. And I'm going to go back to one of your examples because it has to go with one of my questions. So you have the fridge. I love the way that you explain the analogy, and it can connect to the supermarket. But one of the biggest things, especially with APIs and with big companies like HubSpot, is governance. So you might have the credit card of what you want to order for the fridge. So you might see that you're out of milk and you want to go and you want to talk to the supermarket and get that transferred over to the fridge. But you don't want your kids going in there and saying, we're out of chocolate cake, we're out of Capri Suns, and then all of a sudden it appears there. With being HubSpot as big as it is, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome with making sure that the APIs were properly governed and consistent in quality? Because if I'm an executive, I might not want everybody at the company to understand our win rates on customers or what everyone's salary is or whatever information. But if I put an MCP on top of that and give that access to the company, they might be able to learn information. And who knows, maybe, I don't know if you've seen Gusto, but they had like espionage spies, like people working at the company. So imagine, there's a spy in our company and he's reporting back. But like, how have you managed governance with a company as big as HubSpot?
For sure. Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that's really important there as well is like, I don't know if there's ever like a finish line that one crosses there. I think it's always kind of a process in which one is, or a company or a group or team or whatever is getting better on that. So it's one of the things that we've been like continuously getting better on. I don't know if we're ever going to reach a state where everything is just ideal, especially, nowadays the market's changing so much. There could be an entirely different protocol by the time that we've reached the Shangri-La of this API land. So I think that's really important. What additional context, so the API tooling team that I was working with at HubSpot for a lot of this kind of like overarching infrastructure plays, they're building that substrate, they're building those tools, they're building that infrastructure, they're building those recommendations, smart, opportunities to make APIs more consistent. But we're not localizing all of our API development to like one team. So there's pros and cons to that. One of the things that I think really pushes this over the line into being like a good idea, and it's good that HubSpot does this, is because there's not that domain expertise. So while my team might know a lot more about HubSpot APIs and like building those APIs, they might not know enough about, let's say we're building let's say we have a surveys API. I might not really know that much about surveys. So the design of the API could be consistent, but it might not be useful. So what we've elected for is domain teams that are kind of owning that area are also going to be creating their APIs with a lot of help from our central team. So that's great. But then again, now that's distributed. So it's really hard to make this consistent. One of the common themes that we saw here as well, and I mentioned previously on the call, would be you can have the best documentation in the world. If it's not being read, then it's not being leveraged here. So we had a lot of documentation that we made available to different degrees of success based on the team. One of the things that we did was take some of those rules or advisement and then build that into our internal like API linting services that we have, and then stratify those as kind of like red, yellow, green rule sets here. So you literally cannot progress, if X is not available. So making that automated, I have no intention. I don't think anyone on my team or maybe anyone at all does. I'm sure there's somebody out there. I don't want to be the API police, right? I want things to be consistently designed, but I'm not trying to go around and wag a finger at everyone here. So our ability to kind of make that clear about what's consistency looking like, to kind of evaluate things, especially with some of the new AI tooling that's available, to evaluate the structure of these APIs and then provide kind of governance moments at the point of design or at the point of development has been really, really nice. And it also provides clarity to teams. I always say too, it's tough because the more limiting you are, that's less fun, but it's like putting your thumb over the water hose. The more that you cover that up, the faster the water is going to go. So the more limits we can put on, they breed creativity, and limits also can breed some progress as well.
That's so well said. And it's funny because like I'm always going back to like GraphQL and GraphQL Federation. So GraphQL Federation is fantastic for like the domain design, having multiple different teams working together. But they have things like graph pruning, they have graph schema design and collaboration, because they want to make sure that the schema of the API is properly collaborated. And it's kind of cool to see how you guys are also doing it at HubSpot, but you guys are predominantly REST shop, right?
Yep. That's the case now, and who knows what the future may hold. But yeah, definitely a REST shop. As somebody who's worked in logistics and stuff like the post office, I'm always happy to not be using SOAP. But outside of that, yeah, predominantly a REST shop here at HubSpot.
That's awesome. And then just like side question, because I'm always asking people this that are in the tech space, what AI tools are you using daily? And it could be for work, but it could also be for like personal. But what AI tools do you use on a daily basis, like Claude Code, Cursor, and then also what are you guys currently using at HubSpot?
For sure. Yeah, I would say HubSpot has been pretty generous in their ability to provide tooling for product managers as well as especially engineers as well. All of our engineering teams it's almost pretty much a requirement to be kind of AI fluent to really work at HubSpot now. So, definitely Cursor, definitely Claude Code as well. For me personally, just even using Perplexity has been very useful. ChatGPT in general is useful for me. One of the biggest sea changes for me that I've had is things like Replit or Lovable. So working with design, we have some great designers here. We have some great documents that we put together for projects. That's all well and good, and that's the way that it has been going. However, you can imagine at the scale of HubSpot or even many other companies, the amount of documents and PRDs and everything else, it's always N+1 for that, and it's tough to keep track of. Now, being able to use some of these AI tools to where I have some rudimentary coding experience, but not enough to get the ideas there. Now with those AI tools available, let's say I can provide all that documentation like I did previously. However, I can also spin up a quick app or prototype that's interactive. It's very clear what we're looking for. I can have a requirements doc next to it. That's great to see a bulleted list of the requirements or a Jira ticket or linear or what have you. But actually seeing the artifact in person and seeing those interactions, not only clearly delineates what the project goal is, but it can really elicit some more questions. Like clicking this button, what is this actually doing? This isn't providing a lot of value here. Maybe another statistic would be more important to put here on this page, et cetera. So that would probably be a lot of the tools that I'm using predominantly. But I can use it for anything. As you can imagine, I play a lot of music here as well, and it's great for everything from prototyping stuff for AIs, or if I have a writer's block and I need a new chord progression or something like that, I'm able to use just a LLM for that as well. So yeah, a lot of usage across the board.
That's amazing. And with Lovable, one of the things I've been struggling with is they're always posting new users. They're kind of conveying towards anyone can build a business in a day, which is quite amazing what they can do. From your usage with them, do you typically use it to kind of spin up a prototype and then you show the developers, hey, this is what we want. You can interact with it, add comments, whatever. But what happens after that? You guys actually take that code that Lovable spun up and actually implement it into production at HubSpot, or do they just kind of use it for prototyping and ideation?
For sure. Yeah, this is almost more of an interactive design resource for sure. I can't speak too broadly about exclusively using Lovable or Replit to build a business on, but definitely at least HubSpot with the amount of important customer and business data that we have, definitely better just to have that kind of manual look, and a lot of great engineers on the team to look forward at this. Now, if some of that can help provide some impetus to moving forward, that would be great. But at least currently right now, definitely not taking a product manager vibe coded basis and putting it into production. So definitely you can rest assured for any HubSpot customers out there as well.
No, that's every week you hear on Twitter, and it's I think Coinbase said it, that they were 60% of our code now is written by LLMs. And I was like, what? And then now you're seeing all these companies that are saying that their codes are written by LLMs. And I'm like, I'm a little worried about that statistic. I'd love your feedback on it, because I think I don't know. We see a lot of people saying oh, the future will be you just prompt and you tell it what you want it to build. But I'm like, if you've worked with enterprises, you've worked with enterprise data, you can't just prompt it, because my co-founder always says this and I steal it from him, but code is a liability. The more code that you add, the more risk that you add into the company. And people are saying, oh, I just vibe coded this, we can move it into production. I'm like, hey guys, I don't know, but what's your take on that? Vibe coding things into production, especially given HubSpot scale?
For sure. And I think there could be some varying opinions on this. Could be wrong on this as well. For me personally, it would give me a little bit of trepidation around that. Now, that being said, I think there's a lot of great use cases, not only just for the prototyping, but let's say if there's certain maybe if there's a small app that can help, your family or your extended family, or some use case that you guys have, something for planning mutual vacations or something, totally fine as well. Whenever we move into an enterprise space, people's livelihoods and businesses are predicated on this. There's a lot of financial and there's personal identifying information on this as well. I think a grain of consideration is worth doing there. So I would say definitely a lot of AI tools made available to our developers at HubSpot. But talking to my teams and stuff, they can use it. They'll generate some code. Potentially that can be super helpful. And then you're going to have someone who's very senior, someone who's a HubSpot engineer, a senior HubSpot engineer, who's going to be going through parsing that, separating kind of the signal from the noise, and building that forward. So in some cases that can accelerate things. In some cases it's maybe would have been faster to just write this straight up, a human authored from the get-go. That being said, as things change, if you would have told me some of these tools would be available 3 or 4 years ago, it wouldn't have even made sense to me. So as we kind of have hockey stick that exponential growth of AI, That could change, but at least currently, I would say, there's a lot of value in having that expertise and senior engineering leadership and senior engineering personnel, or even just regular engineering team members on there as well, to kind of make those executive decisions and that really understand the gravity of some of these decisions we make, particularly when it comes to customer livelihood and security.
You gave me an idea for LinkedIn post that I'm going to do later, but I absolutely love that because I totally agree. And have you ever heard of the company Scale AI? They got acquired by Meta for like 14 billion, I think, a couple months ago.
Okay, it sounds kind of familiar. I'm not sure if I know what they do.
So Alexander Wang, they're kind of like they were like one of the first AI companies. They started like 8-9 years ago, and it was big on like LLM ops, everything that kind of like AI does. And an internal employee leaked a while ago that basically was on Hacker News that their AIs are actually just a bunch of people in the Philippines, a bunch of people.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. And they're like, they're doing all this stuff, and it's actually just thousands and thousands of employees that are in like the Philippines or like overseas. And I remember I laughed at that, but then I was like, I kind of feel a little bit safer knowing that it's actual humans that are having an interaction, but they were pawning it off as AI until the technology caught up. And now then they actually became an AI company. But I thought that was super interesting because my take is there should always be a human involved. Like they should obviously check the code. AI, the best developers, they use AI to their advantage to become AI first, and they use it to be more productive, but they're always there driving in the driving seat. So I like everything that you said about that.
For sure. Yeah, it's a good point. I think there's a unique irony about that as well with Scale AI, because a lot of these times it's like use these AI tools and you won't have to hire like additional customer support heads or some of these other roles. You can use AI for that, and then you look at an AI company there, and what are they doing? They're using additional headcount to imitate AI there. So the irony is not lost on that as well. But yeah, super interesting stuff.
Well said. And then I want to jump back a little bit to MCP because we hear this all the time. First, it was GraphQL was going to replace REST. And then it was like, see you later, REST. GraphQL is the new thing. It's super hyped up. Now it's MCP. People are saying MCP is the future. APIs might not even be a thing. That's what one guy told me. He said that actually maybe they just LLMs talk to each other and there's no more APIs. We kind of disagree with it that MCP will replace APIs, but what's your take? Where do you see MCP fitting into the larger picture of the API ecosystem as well as just engineering in general?
Sure. Yeah. At a high level, I'm super pro MCP in general, but that being the case, my overarching framework is going to be about use cases, about implementation, of which perhaps it's not always the right tool. It's kind of funny. The other day, I live in Austin here, and we have the Waymos now. So me and my wife took a Waymo downtown, and I could tell that she was a little bit uncomfortable in the car. I was surprised, like, what's going on? And she goes, well, Cody, maybe it's because there's nobody driving the car right now, right? So similarly to that, I don't know if I want to be in a situation in which there's nobody driving the car for all of these integrate, or it's an AI, I guess. There's no human driving the car, at least, for all these situations. So I think, that's one caveat there. Likewise, too, I mean, agents are great. MCP is great. There's a great place for standardized apps, and there's a great place for, workflows as well. Not every workflow needs to be agentic. There's a lot of deterministic workflows that are very clear, and we can leverage that as well. And then also not be incurring potentially some additional costs from AI. Now that being said, if I'm at a different sophistication level, or if I'm familiar with this, I'm willing to hazard this, and my use case is more well suited to kind of having that agentic critical thinking on that. So let's say, for example, some of the HubSpot agents we have to really synthesize a lot of the different data across lots of HubSpot records in business, then it does make a lot of sense. So I would say in a lot of cases, like it's going to evolve some for sure. I don't think REST APIs are going anywhere anytime soon. As I mentioned previously, I mean, as recently as 2023, I was working with SOAP APIs to, in logistics as well. So even that's kind of around at some point. So I think I think APIs are definitely going to be around as well. Likewise, important APIs are really the catalyst to great MCP servers as well. But I think as the use case evolves and as what people are looking for across systems changes, MCP will become more and more relevant. And I think also when people get more familiar and some of the security concerns one might have go away, that would also help.
That's so well, like, I totally agree with all that. I love the Waymo example you did because my wife also the same thing when we were in San Francisco. She was like very, like, you could tell rigid. I was like, what's up? She's like, there's nobody driving the car. And I was like, yeah, isn't that amazing? And she's like, that's terrifying. So and what's funny, they also brought Waymos here to Miami. And Jacob, he just recently moved down, but he's like kind of grew up in the Boca area. But there's a joke. first of all, Florida drivers are horrible. Miami drivers even worse. So I have a theory that Waymo will be here and then it'll be gone because it just can't navigate the roads because exactly. And the best example is this is so when professional like esports players like that play Counter-Strike or they play like Rainbow Six Siege or like Call of Duty, because they're professionals, they anticipate the enemy's moves. And when they play amateurs, they struggle a little bit because it's so random and they can't anticipate it. And my theory is the same thing is going to happen here in Miami because the Waymo is going to use LLMs to anticipate what a car might do, but it's going to be so random because Miami drivers don't care, and then the Waymo is going to just rip it out. But I love the Waymo example that you had.
Totally, for sure. I'm glad we're not alone in that, for sure. But yeah, no doubt. I think there's a great use case for it. Sometimes it's a great case for a Waymo even as well. But sometimes I like to have that interaction with the driver, or we have to make some changes, make some adjustments on the route. And it's great to have that a little bit more level of granular control on that.
No, I totally agree. And then what's funny is like REST API is not going anywhere. I don't know this guy, but like my friend knows him. He's a COBOL engineer at like one of the biggest banks in the world. He makes easily $2 million a year liquid because he's the only guy that can touch their mainframe. So my friend was telling me, he comes in spinning his Ferrari keys, sweatpants, beard, like everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? He goes directly to like, in this case, like just pretend it's JP Morgan, but Jamie Dimon's office. He goes, give me the laptop and just makes the changes. And it's like, guys, if we're still running on COBOL, REST is not going away anywhere. There's no way to replace it all.
Totally agreed. Yeah, I don't think there's a big impetus to try and push for that. I think some of that might be hype, people are saying, but all that to be said, that doesn't mean MCP is not extremely exciting, valuable, and provides some unique use cases. But different tools for different purposes, for sure.
Totally agree. And then on to the MCP. So like, I also think it's super useful here. Where do you see that some of the hype is though around MCP? Because you obviously have a very clear understanding of hype versus reality. You've led the implementation at HubSpot. Where are you seeing the most value of MCP at HubSpot or even in your personal life? And then where are you seeing that it lacks a little bit? And this is great from a PM point of view because you get to choose, between the good and the bad because you actually get to see it because you experience it. But where do you see the hype and reality with MCP?
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of different angles here. I think one of which is exciting. One of my fellow teams here at HubSpot managed the HubSpot MCP server, which is one of the first kind of CRM kind of enterprise MCP servers to largely come out. And it's also it's an available connector within ChatGPT. So we're really excited about that release. You guys can interact with that today even. So let's say if I'm in ChatGPT and I'm interacting, I'm asking it questions, and I would like to really get some details on my HubSpot account and understand more about my business without having to kind of be within the HubSpot UI, without having to navigate that and interacting with it in plain language alongside other tools. That's really exciting. I think some of these headless implementations that you can use to gather and kind of grok that data as well, alongside other systems in place with plain language, I think that's very exciting. That's one of the biggest things that gets me really kind of jazzed about some of this stuff as well. I think a great UI is really important. Design is very important. There's a lot of use cases in which kind of this more like headless or just directly prompting information gathering is really attractive, which MCP makes that quick. It makes that kind of cross-platform and makes that accessible in a way that is a lot of times a little bit easier. The slope of learning is going to be pretty minimal to typing in a plain language prompt engineering aside. So I think that's one thing that's really cool. Outside of that, I would say part of the evangelism of like MCP in general is an area in which it can be worked on. So let's say at HubSpot, we have standard apps. We have MCPs available today. We'll have like a lot more available there. We have our client. We have an MCP server. We have, things like there's a company we acquired called Dashworks that provides really rich knowledge base gathering. All of these are like quasi apps, but they're not all apps at the same time. One of the things that I don't want to foist upon our customers is like, they run a business, let's say they run a bakery and they're managing on a HubSpot. They're selling a lot of their baked goods online. If they're going to be managing this with external systems, I don't want to put the onus on them to be like, not only do you need to know the best about cooking a croissant, but you need to know the difference in MCP versus like an app, an API. So how do we actually make this available and make this clear to customers? Is like, this is like an AI enabled, integration, or these are the tools. Similarly to that, sometimes it's tough to really understand which tools are available and to understand that at the right time. So there's a lot of great documentation. A lot of the MCPs that I've worked with Some of them will have like a list tools, like that kind of like meta tool on top of it, but that's available like post authentication. So we're already past the moment at that point for them to understand really the full breadth of what the MCP is doing outside of the documentation, which we've talked about to a great deal today already. So I think there's some areas for improving and just like contextualizing that, understanding what tools are available. Security concerns, obviously at a high level, which we'll have to think about as MCP evolves, and we'll see some issues that crop up and can adjust on that as well. But a lot of it is also kind of just contextualizing. If I'm a customer, I want to be an expert in my business. I don't want to have to be an expert in APIs and MCPs. That's my job. They want to do their job there. So how can we use this to help them? I typically don't think it's rare. Outside of you and I both mentioning talking to our families about it, it's rare that someone is going to go to work and call their mom and say, "Mom, I got to use an agent today." Agents for agent's sake is not going to be great, but if it can help them do the job better and MCP could help them do the job better across these systems, then it has value. So I think positioning is one of the biggest things to think about here as well.
You're spot on with the positioning, because one of the biggest things that I tell people is like, when you're building a company, you either have to adapt to their workflow or you have to completely radicalize it and it has to be completely changed. But typically all the best companies adapt. And so a good example of this is Uber, is that they didn't invent some new phone that you can only call Ubers from. No, they invented from the App Store, and it's an app, and you are used to calling taxis and you just do it from your phone. And a cool story is when OpenAI was kind of building, they built for 8 years, like kind of in silence. And around year 6 is when they released kind of like ChatGPT, and it didn't really get that much traction. It was kind of slow, but Sam Altman was looking at the data, and he kept noticing that people were trying to talk to the API. They were trying to talk to it like in English. And so what they did is they kind of rebranded a little bit, and they made it that famous chat box, which is now you can talk to the LLMs. And if you look now with like MCP and everything, it's what you've been saying that you guys are doing at HubSpot is like, I don't want to become an expert on AI or anything. I'm an expert on baking croissants, and I'm an expert on my business. I simply want to talk to my business with English. I don't want to be able to query an API. I don't know what JSON is. And I think it's so interesting that Sam Altman also had that realization. He was like, wow, these people actually just want to talk to the API in English. And so I think everything that you said so far with the MCP is really about empowering the person, and how do you drop it into their workflow, basically.
Totally. Yeah, you got to meet people where they are as well, because that's how you provide additive value instead of like a detour until they can get back to their day. And that's one of the things we try to avoid, at HubSpot, and then generally in my product career as well, is I don't want you to have to go out of your way to get this benefit, right? Meeting you where you are is where that impact's really going to be at.
No, well said. And so we're almost at time. So I do have 2 final questions. We're looking into the future in 10 years. We're back on this episode or something, and you've had to guess basically the sort of conversations that we'll be having on this topic. How has the API landscape or architecture changed? Has MCP completely taken over? Has MCP just been another tool in our toolbox? But what's your big bet for the next 10 years, just in APIs, or it can even be in tech in general?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. I can answer more quickly since my big bet isn't wagering too much here, but I would say, I think APIs certainly will be around 10 years from now. I would assume, the rest, if we look at the complexity of SOAP XML and kind of how hard it is to really like understand what that is at a glance versus REST, it's a pretty significant jump there as well. I think there's something similar between REST APIs or even Graph APIs and MCP, where it's even kind of more abstracted and like more or plain language there, and it's made a little bit more clear. So I think things will continue to get more clear there as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an additional layer beyond MCP that comes about in the 10 years. I think radical innovation, and even the way that A2A is evolving right now, which is a little bit newer as well. For there to be some kind of new paradigm, wouldn't surprise me at all. But I would say I do think REST APIs will still be pretty relevant. I think that things will continue to be navigated towards like plain language interactions, simple interactions, AI-driven interactions that really allow people who have a lot of great industry knowledge or expertise or use case knowledge, but they might lack software engineering knowledge or implementation knowledge. We're going to keep narrowing that gap, I believe, to where if you know a lot about your business and use case, which is ultimately the most important thing, you're going to be able to act on that more quickly, and you're going to be able to act on that between more systems. So conservatively, I would also say that most enterprise or kind of large scale, or even probably startups as well, will have an MCP server made available. Now, whether that's more discrete in a very particular use case, whether it's a kind of a broad mega MCP server across their platform, that could vary from team to team. But I think definitely larger proliferance of MCP servers, still the existence of REST APIs, and really the additional enablement of like integrations and integration pathways to allow people who know the problem to solve the problem without necessarily needing to know all of the technical solutions.
No, I agree 100% fully on that. I think we would make the same bet. And then the last question is, you've learned quite a lot from your journey from technical content writer into what you're doing today. What kind of advice would you give the audience, especially for someone starting out into the career, maybe for someone that's starting out as a technical content writer, or for somebody that's just getting into tech? Like, what the heck do you do with all this AI, MCP, and all this hype that we're all going to be replaced? What kind of advice do you have for the future generation?
For sure. Yeah. I think at a high level, what's really important is, the job you have today is not always necessarily the job you have tomorrow, both in good and bad ways. So I think that one of the most important things there is to really get into a role and understand what that role has to make available to you. I've worked with a lot of different product managers from various different kind of swaths and pedigrees there. So there'll be people who like study product management, more especially younger PMs I'll work with now, since that's more of a delineated field than it was, whenever I was first getting into the field. And they'll kind of have like a product management study in college, and then they'll do like product management internship, assistant product manager and product manager. That's not always the only way to do this. I've worked with other people who've worked in customer support or technical writers like myself, or even people who, solutions engineering or even customers are sometimes can get brought in as a product manager. So the main thing for me in product is you're trying to solve for customers, and you're trying to enable your teams to do the most that they can in like one fell swoop or one iteration. So really, if I'm a customer success manager, if I'm on customer support, you're really, really, really plugged into customer problems, working things out with customers, talking to additional personnel about approaching solutions. That's great value for that. Technical writing is understanding how can I take this complex concept and make it available to as many people as I can in kind of in one fell swoop. Kind of all this stuff can tie together in a lot of ways. So regardless of what your role is, even if it's not in tech as well, I mean, customer support outside of tech, or even logistics in a lot of ways. A lot of these different roles have something to offer. So I would just say definitely get the lion's share and most of the juice out of those roles you can get, and then try and find what the next move in and what's exciting. I always think it's important to, let's say, have like set a timeline. So let's say, 3 years, I'm going to be at this company in this role. If I get a promotion, that'd be great. If not, that's okay too. But I want to learn X, Y, and Z in 3 years. And at that time, I'm going to look up and, I'll pick my head up and reconsider. But it's really hard to write and edit at the same time. So like set up a period of time, set a goal, get the most you can out of that particular role in a lot of transferable ways. And then after some time, see how you can kind of play that forward. But it's all about kind of that patience, absorbing all the stuff that you can there, and then kind of moving forward to what excites you ideally is what's going to keep you going over the long term.
Okay, amazing. And so that's the end of our episode of The Good Thing. One last question that we have: how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way they can reach you if they have questions, or they just want kind of advice, or they're interested in the offerings that HubSpot has?
For sure. Yeah, I would love to talk to anybody who has any questions, comments, feedback, etc. I'm on LinkedIn as Cody Holden. That's my name here on the screen as well. And then you can also reach out to me at cholden@hubspot.com, which is my work email. I'm happy to talk all things HubSpot, APIs, MCP, or more New Orleans food as well at any time.
I might take you up on that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cody, for joining us on The Good Thing. Everybody have a great Friday, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks, Cody.
Thank you.